Hello, and welcome to the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I am A's Philosophy, and today we are going to be having our fourth installment in the ID update series that I have been doing. So basically, this is something I've been doing to bring attention to news and articles and information from the intelligent design community. These are people who are credentialed scientists who reject evolution and believe that nature and what we observe in science points to the idea of an intelligent creator. And today we're going to be getting into something that I think is extremely interesting, but is not getting enough attention in the general public, which is to be expected because a very important myth has been for decades now promoted by evolutionary biologists and people like that, people who want to promote evolutionary theory, has been completely overturned and destroyed by a very recent scientific study. In that myth, that lie, if you want to call it that, is the idea that humans and chimps are extremely genetically similar. You hear numbers being thrown around there. Humans and chimps are 1%, 2% genetically similar. Things like that. This myth has been ingrained in the public conscience by leading scientific institutions for several decades now, and it is put forward as one of the leading indicators that humans and chimps share a common ancestor, and that all the great apes are closely related from evolutionary standpoint, and they all have a very recent they all diverged fairly recently in evolutionary history from some original ape type creature. Obviously, we don't have the original species, whatever they were, between humans and chimps or otherwise, but this is what they claim. And this idea that humans and chimps are 99% similar has been really promoted and, like I've said before, ingrained in the public conscience in a wide variety of ways. I remember hearing this, I believe, in the public schools, but if it wasn't there, it was surely thereafter. People are taught this in their education. It's really one of the um, leading individual facts promoted by what I'll call evolutionists, to suggest that humans are essentially just apes with big brains. And people are going to have it's so established in the public mind that people are going to have a hard time accepting the truth of what's being revealed by really not creationist scientists, but just who knows who they are. For all intents and purposes, they seem to be people who accept evolutionary theory. But what they did, and we'll look at the specifics in a little bit, but what they did was they went back and they did a very comprehensive study of not just human genetics and chimp genetics, but the genetics of not just
Oh, let me
human
get that.
genetics, but the genetics, the genes, the genomes of other so-called great apes. And believe it or not, the level of depth in this study had never been done before, which is why the myth was allowed to percolate out there. You may ask yourself, and we're going to actually see this as well. You may ask yourself, well, how could they claim that humans and chimps are 99% similar? And you're going to sit here and say they didn't already know this? What's changed? Well, actually, what changed is the extent to which the genomes were sequenced. The original genomes were not sequenced to the detail that they were in this most recent study. And it wasn't originally, it was just humans and chimps. It wasn't the other great apes. But now we have a very detailed analysis that has just been released of human DNA, chimp DNA, and the DNA of other of the so-called great apes. And what they found was amazing, in my opinion, based on what has been told. What they found was that there are massive, massive genetic differences between humans, chimps, and the other great apes, far greater than the 1% that was previously promoted by the scientific community. Um, yeah, and not just between humans. So obviously, we do share some similarity between humans and chimps. There's no denying that. There are places in the genome that are extremely similar between humans and chimps. But they wanted to lead us to believe that for the most part, the gene was 99% similar. And now we know that that is absolutely incorrect. This is very important because it leads to very serious problems for evolutionary theory. And it destroys their narrative that the reason we can assume that humans and chimps share a common ancestor is because of how genetically similar we are. Where we're not genetically similar, not nearly as much as we thought. So it's going to be interesting to see how they shift the narrative. But let's get into some data, some details, and take a look. Well, first of all, let's look at the scientific community promoting the lie. Just so you know that this is actually something the scientific community did say and misled people into believing. It's not, I think they're actually going to change their story so much. They're going to say, "We never said that humans and chimps are not you." I think they're actually going to have to go that route. Oh, we just like they did with other like vestigial organs. Oh, we never said that there was no use for them. We just said that the use changed over time. No, if you go back and look, originally vestigial organs, it was supposed to be that it was totally useless and had evolved out of its original function. And when that was debunked, when they realized that there really aren't any vestigial organs, everything's being used like a designer would design a thing. They had to change their story. Well, we never really said they were totally useless. We actually just said that it wasn't its original use in the previous organisms. But if you go back, I can prove that another time. But if you go back and look, yes, they did originally claim that vestigial organs didn't have any function in their new organism because it was useless now. But so they had to shift the narrative, and I think that's it's gonna be interesting just to see. They're not gonna give up the lie that humans and chimps share a common ancestor and evolution is true overall. They're just gonna have to change their story and figure out how they're gonna convince the public to accommodate the new information, despite their previous misleading the information that was put out. So, well, first of all, yeah, here's the Scientific American website. This is from March 1st, 2024. And just so you know, up here at the top, Scientific American. Forgive my computer for taking a long time. So this is Scientific American website, which is just a trash, disgusting organization that promotes so many lies. They are not teaching real science. They are teaching materialistic philosophy as science. I mean, some of it's real science, but a lot of it's political too. Some of it, how perfectionism hurts parents and their kids. Yeah, it's not all lies, but they do promote lies as and promote their theories as science. One of them is so this is a Scientific American website. You can see the URL up here if you squint closely enough. What does the fact that we share 95% of our genes with the chimpanzee mean, and how is the number derived? Well, they say 95 right there, but if you go down and read the article, it says right here, we now have large regions of the chimpanzee genome fully sequenced and can compare them to human sequences. Most studies indicate that when genomic regions are compared between chimpanzees and humans, they share 98.5 sequence identity. The actual relationship depends on what types of sequences are being compared and the size of the comparison unit. A published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences in 2002 suggested that under most rigorous alignments, the match would only be 95% similarity. Okay, so they're saying it could be as low as 95%. We're actually going to find out the newest information. It's way more than. So that's a 5% difference, is what they're saying overall. And that they did use the word overall right here. So that's the entire genome. And they're saying that that is probably the biggest differences, the difference. What we're going to see is they now know that humans and chimps are much more different than 5%, much more. And you have Scientific American right here saying that, well, it could be as much as 5%. That myth has been destroyed. But if you go on reading, this resulted from the researchers treating changes involving small insertions and deletions of bases differently than previous investigators did over a very large region. A few questions still remain as to whether the chimpanzee genome sequencing are of high enough quality at this point for reliable comparison. And here we go. In general, however, the overall conclusion that most genes would share about 98.5 similarity. Okay. And sometimes you get numbers down here saying, thus chimps may share as much as 99.9% of the same genes with most of these genes. So basically, we're getting a number around 98% from Scientific American. 98, 99 overall is what they said. Here is a paper from Nature. Oh no, that's not the one. That's the. So this is nature.com. And the chimpanzee genome. This is right on their website. Let's see up in Nate.collections. In this focus, what makes us human? And it says right here, we share not more than 98% of our DNA and almost all of our genes with our closest living relative, the chimpanzee. So here again, we have a highly respected, quote unquote, scientific magazine outlet, nature.com, promoting the narrative that humans and chimps are 98%, give or take, similar, share so many of our genes. We're basically the same creature. It's so obvious. We'll get one more. This is actually the Smithsonian website, Human Origins. This is the official Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History website. Evidence, genetics. What does it mean to be human? And we see here, DNA is thus especially important in the study of evolution. The amount of difference in DNA is a test of the difference between one species and another, and thus how closely or distantly related they are. Right here. While the genetic difference between individual humans today is minuscule, only about 0.1% on average, study of the same aspects of the chimpanzee genome indicates a difference of about 1.2%. A difference of 3.1% distinguishes us and the African apes from the Asian great ape, the orangutan. So what they are saying here is that we are 1.2% different from chimpanzees. This is still on the Smithsonian website right now. You can go here and look at it. This is the Smithsonian. What does it mean to be human? humanorigins.smithsonianinstitute.edu/evidence/genetics. Right there in the URL. They are still promoting this lie, even though it's been refuted, that humans and chimps are 1.2% genetically different. We're going to see that this is false. And note that they are promoting the lie of evolution based on this lie itself. The amount of read this right here. The amount of difference in DNA is a test of the difference between one species and another, and thus how closely or distantly related they are. They go on to parrot the now false. We know this is false. 1.2 difference between humans and chimps as evidence of evolution. And here again, we have right here, geneticists have come up with a variety of ways of calculating the percentages. The 1.2% chimp-human distinction. So there's no denying that they are claiming that humans and chimps are 1.2% different here. Okay, well, they do go, okay, so they do want to say there's a 4 to 5% distinction when looking at everything. And the 1.2% distinction is presumably in sections of DNA which are known to be similar. So that could lead to 5 to 6%. Okay, so they're being a little bit honest. But they are saying that we're extremely similar. And the differences amount to perhaps as much as at most maybe 5%. So between what scientific outlet you're looking at, the differences are probably 2 to at most 5%. And what this most recent study we're going to look at shows is that it looks like we're at least 15% genetically different from chimpanzees. At least 15%, or maybe about 15%. Which is, so they said 7% was the difference between humans and rhesus monkeys. So we are more than twice as different from chimp. We know we're twice as different from apes genetically than that. Now we know that. And I just want to ask a question. If this is true, does this not falsify evolution? Maybe it doesn't, but look at what they're saying here. The amount of difference is the difference in DNA is a test between one species and another, and how closely or distantly related they are. So now that the 1% to 2% overall difference has been debunked, what are they going to say? Because now it doesn't look like we're very closely related to them genetically. So can we say that their evolution is still true? If they're using this as a test for evolution, now that it's been falsified, how are they going to change their story? Anyways, let's get into the actual data. I'm just trying to show you that leading scientific institutions have promoted the lie that humans and chimps are about 1 to 2% difference. Or if you look in some places, maybe up to 5% difference. But really, the important stuff is 1 to 2% difference. Good to see you, Freddie. All right. So there it is. I just proved from a number of so-called credible scientific institutions and outlets and sources, they're claiming that humans and chimps are about 1 to 2% difference. Yeah, I'm going to show you. So this is the actual paper. It's published in Nature. Complete sequencing. So this was published in April 9th, 2025. Complete sequencing of ape genomes. And these are the scientists who participated. And it doesn't say it in the abstract. Let's see if we can. I should have done this earlier. They're talking about. This is a bunch of scientific jargon. I want to find. They're saying here they finally did a 99 to 99% analysis of the genome. So this has never been done before. Let's see here. I'm sorry, I need to find this. Here it is. Okay, so you have to kind of read way. You have to read way down until you get to the good stuff. Overall, sequence comparisons among the complete ape genomes revealed greater divergence than previously estimated. Ooh. Okay, so we're getting to some good stuff here. So what they're saying here is once they did this highly detailed analysis of the ape genomes, they're finding there's greater divergence than was previously estimated. Indeed, read this, 12.5 to 27.3% of an ape genome failed to align or was inconsistent with a simple one-to-one alignments, thereby introducing gaps. Gap divergence showed a 5-fold to 15-fold difference in the number of affected megabases when compared to single nucleotide variants. Now, that's just saying the new methodology showed a 5 to 15 times more difference than previous methodologies. Okay, let's see if we can find. Let me see if I can find this in the short amount. I'm trying not to bore people. I wish I had done this beforehand. Anyways, I did kind of cover it there. The reason I don't see it, and I haven't been able, I found it because I was reading the analyses in basically summaries of the information. So I'm trying to find it in the actual paper. I will find it. Go away. Hold on. Let's see if we can zoom out real fast. All right. They have basically hidden the data, but I already kind of demonstrated that they did say right where I showed it where they said that they have man, I wish I could find. I'm sorry, folks. I think they tried to hide it because they knew the data was so destructive that they put it somewhere where you have to really look for it. It's probably in these charts or something. But let's go to the write-ups because that's where the analysis was done. Anyways, all right, here we go. Okay, so that was the paper itself. You can go find it, but so this is from May 21st. New complete genome shows 14.9% difference from human genome. And just so you know, I'm not making this up. We have where is it? Sorry, folks. This is the low production value. What's All right, so let's go to this one. This is from evolutionnews.org. Critics struggle with evidence. Humans and chimps are 15% genetically different. This is from a couple days ago, June 18th, about a week ago. June 18th, 2025. So here we're at. At the end of the day, humans and chimps specifically are 15% genetically different. Okay. And so this has been an article right here. We've been discussing an important new paper in Nature, complete sequence. We just looked at it, which reports data showing that humans and chimps aren't merely 1% different, as we've often been told, but are more like 14 to 15% genetically different. This 1% statistic has been an icon of evolution, A piece of evidence that is widely believed and used as an argument for evolution, even though it is false, in this case actually says very little about evolutionary claims. And I want to show you this right here. Authorities support our calculations. Before we dive into what critics are saying, I want to note that good authorities have come to similar numerical conclusions as I did. And who is I? It's Casey Luskin wrote this article. He was the who originally started bringing this to light on evolutionnews.org. So we have Richard Buggs, a professor of evolutionary genomics at Queen Mary University of London, has written on the subject with posts on X and his personal blog. He was not an author of the original Nature paper, but he is thanked there in the first line of acknowledgments, so clearly he knows something about the topic. Buggs wrote on X when the paper was first released back in April, first complete sequencing of chimpanzee genome finds 12.5% difference with human genome for non-sex chromosomes. And I think it's actually higher for sex chromosomes. So here it is right here. So this is this is a professor of evolutionary genomics at a university in London. And we're going to bring up the tweet here if we can. His name is Professor Richard Buggs. And his oh, that's not helpful. Anyways, he comes up with a number of 12.5% difference, which is much greater than 1 to 2% difference. So I just show you this so that we know that that I and these intelligent design proponents are not simply fabricating this very shocking information. When the latest human genome assembly was used as a target and the latest chimpanzee assembly was aligned to it, the authors report gap divergence of 13.3% and a single nucleotide variant of 1.6%. So basically, to get the total difference, you add those two numbers. I'm not going to go into why that's the case, but when you add these two numbers, you get about 15%. You get, but at least 12, maybe 13, 14, 15%. And adding the average gap divergence, average single nucleotide variant divergence together gives a total difference of 14.9%. There it is. This is unbelievable. Thus, as I understand it, and this is the professor, again, this is a professor of where is it? Evolutionary genomics at Queen Mary University in London. So this is the kind of person that the evolutionists and people who believe the quote-unquote scientists, he's not a fan. I'm guarantee you he's not an intelligent design proponent. He is actually just reporting the data. Look what he says here. This is his own words. These are his own words. Thus, as I understand it, for the latest assemblies, 85.1% of the nucleotides in human genome have 1-to-1 exact matches in the chimpanzee genome. So that's a difference of 15% from apes, from our supposed closest common ancestors. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, before we look at any more data, this is a massive, massive problem for evolution. I wouldn't go so far as to say it completely falsifies a theory completely, but this is a huge, gigantic problem that raises all kinds of questions and challenges to evolutionary theory for a number of reasons. First of all, we now know for a fact that they've been lying to us about how genetically similar, or not lying necessarily, because a lie means you know it's a lie. But they've absolutely been misleading the public regarding how genetically similar humans and chimps are. Most people out there believe, because of what has been said, that humans and chimps are 99 to 98% similar genetically. Because that's what's been told. And as I showed in the beginning, these websites promoting that idea, these scientific outlets. So at the very least, this myth has been shattered. That has been a common refrain for the evolutionists. Humans, the reason we can say that we're so we know we have an ancestor with apes, we're so similar to them genetically. We're only 1 to 2% different from apes, because we diverged so recently in evolutionary history. We can see how closely related are to apes compared to other animals by the similarities in the gene. When that whole lie is shattered, it's gone. It's poof, it's gone. It's totally gone. The 99% gene similarity between humans and chimps has been destroyed. It no longer exists, except in the minds of the public. So I'm here to help people understand that this is no longer true. We now know this is not true. And we need to show other people that the 99% similarity between humans and apes is false. It's extremely false. So people are going to question, well, why were we told something differently? And we were led to believe that this was amazing proof of evolution about how similar we are to apes and things like that. So what are they going to say now that we know we're not that similar to apes? Are they going to change this? Actually, we don't have evidence for evolution because, the idea that we're so similar is now has been pretty much falsified, completely falsified. There's no questioning it now. So originally, chimps share 95% DNA with a 25% error rate. No. All right, so let's go forward. Fact check. New complete chimp genome shows 14.9% difference from human genome. This is amazing stuff. To me, this is amazing. Because think of how many people out there still believe the lie. Oh, and I was going to get into why this is such a huge problem for evolution. But let's first just complete our understanding of the actual data. A groundbreaking paper in Nature reports the complete sequencing of ape genomes, and I already showed that. I already covered the Nature article itself. So now we're looking at write-ups of the article, including the genomes for chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, Borean orangutans, so on. Reporting an evolutionary icon, the famous 1% difference between humans and chimp genomes touted across the breadth of popular and other scientific writing and teaching has fallen. Yes, it has. This myth that humans and chimps are very genetically similar is now proven false. It's not true. But it will continue to be believed by massive numbers of people because of how widely the lie has been disseminated by so-called scientists. You might be thinking, hey, weren't these genomes sequenced long ago? The answer is yes, but also no. Yes, we had sequenced genomes from these species in the past, but as the paper itself explains, owing to the repetitive nature of ape genomes, complete assemblies have not been achieved. Current references lack sequence resolution of some of the most dynamic genomic regions, including regions corresponding to lineage-specific gene families. So what this is basically saying is, why were the other studies so wrong? And the reason is because they actually never studied the entire genomes like this paper did. This is the first scientific paper that actually sequenced the entire genomes of apes completely. All the others just looked at little sections and regions and compared them to humans, and they came up with the supposed 98% number, 99. When they finally looked at the entire genome, a very different picture emerged. In the past, scientists had deciphered segments of non-human apes' genomes, but they had never managed to assemble a complete sequence for any species. Isn't that amazing? Is that what people were led to believe? I don't think it was. In the current study, however, Makova and her collaborators used advanced sequencing techniques and algorithms that allowed them to read long segments of DNA and assemble them into a sequence that stretched from one end of each chromosome to the other without any gaps. This has never been done before. So this is the first study like this, and it shatters an evolutionary myth. In other words, the complete ape genomes were never fully sequenced, and they used the human genome as a reference sequence, which made the ape genomes look more human-like than they actually were. From the actual paper itself, most previous genome-wide comparative studies of apes have been limited by the mapping of inferior assemblies to a higher quality human genome. Consequently, human reference biases were introduced. Wow. So they were lying to us all along. They were misleading us all along based on faulty information, and they never clarified that to the public. Contigs were assembled using the human genome as a guide and are therefore humanized in their construction. All the all the previous so-called ape genomes were basically filled in the gaps by human genomes and thus humanized, and that's where the similarities came about. This is an important distinction as some sequences, such as insertions, deletions, and gene duplications, may not be accurately represented by current chimpanzee assembly. Wow. The new ape genomes and the human genome. What's odd is that as one reads the technical paper, a direct comparison between the ape and human genomes is hard to find. This passage seems to be as close as it gets. Overall sequence comparisons among the complete ape genomes revealed a greater divergence than previously estimated. Indeed, 12.5 to 27.3% of ape genome failed to align or was inconsistent with a simple one-to-one alignment, thereby introducing gaps. The reason this wasn't in the paper is because they took it out of the paper. It was so damaging they took it out. They had to put it in the supplemental data. So this article explains, I was trying to find the actual, I think they knew when they did this analysis that what they found was going to be very destructive to evolution. So they hid that information in like this supplemental data that's related to the study, but not actually included in the write-up of the study itself. And you have to go digging into that to find the actual information. Keep saying So here it is right here. So if you look at this, let's see if we can find it in here. Let's see if we can control F this. Yeah, it's hard to find, but anyways, but we have other leading scientists basically analyzing this data, and as I've demonstrated, they came up with these numbers as well. And I've been reading responses from other scientists. The data is not in dispute. What's in dispute is how it should be interpreted. So here again, here's the paper itself. Complete sequencing of ape genomes in Nature from 9th of April 2025. And again, I'm just gonna re-present the scientific papers promoting the lie. Here is Nature, same outfit, which is an outfit that many people supposedly respect. What makes us human? We share more than 98% of our DNA and almost all of our genes with our closest living relative, the chimpanzee. Okay, so there's Nature. We have Scientific American. Thus, chimps and humans may share as much as 99% of the same genes, with most of these genes being 99% similar in their sequences. Okay, so there's Scientific American. And we have Smithsonian website. Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. What does it mean to be human? Humanorigins.si.edu. DNA is thus especially important in the study of evolution. The amount of difference in DNA is a test of difference between one species and another, and thus how closely or distantly related they are. While the genetic difference between individual humans today is minuscule, about 0.1% on average, study of the same aspects of the chimp genome indicates a difference of about 1.2%. Well, is that talking about between humans and chimps? Yes. Because if we look down here, they say the 1.2% chimp human distinction. So let's back off. What have we learned? We've learned that based on a new scientific study that was just released in April of 2025, that humans and chimps are actually only about 85% genetically similar when you look at the entire genome, which is a 15% difference. And this study was the first one to be done of its kind, where there is a very detailed analysis of the entire chimp genome. Now, as we also learned, the reason that previous studies were incorrect, very incorrect, one might also suspect so incorrect it was intentionally so, is because they never did such a detailed level of analysis of the entire genome of chimps and other apes. But now with this new data, the facts is out there that yes, indeed, humans and chimps are not 98% genetically similar. They're actually only about 85% genetically similar. So let's talk about consequences of this information. In my opinion, this is extremely important information that shatters confidence in the evolutionary narrative, the idea, the assertion that humans and chimps are closely related because of we can see this because of their genetic similarities. That's all gone now. So I don't know how they're going to bolster their theory of evolution and chimp and human ancestry now that they don't have the lie that they needed, which is that humans and chimps are extremely genetically similar. What are they going to do? Because they've been lying the whole time, saying that the reason we can say that humans and chimps are closely related evolutionarily, and that is they share is because we're so genetically similar. But now that the genetic similarities myth has been destroyed, they have nothing to stand on. So there's no reason to believe humans and chimps share a common ancestor. At least according to their previous arguments. Now they're going to have to change their arguments to give us another reason to think humans and chimps are share a common ancestor. But their whole argument up to this time has been the genetic similarities. So if that was their argument and that was their proof, well, they've been proven false. Are they going to Are they going to admit that they were wrong and that evolution is false? Of course not, because they have an agenda. But that would seem to be one logical conclusion of the new data. And you have another aspect of this, which is public confidence in these scientists and these scientific research organizations. They are the ones that have demonstrated, just with a couple sources, who have promoted this myth, this false information, as if it's a fact, as if they knew it was true. For decades now, they've been saying this. I remember hearing the 98% genetic similarity decades ago when I was in high school. Or not, or I heard it decades ago and when I was in high school. I mean, I think it's going as far back as when I was really young, I first heard this. That they had sequenced these genomes, and it turned out humans and chimps were, but we were being told this by supposedly very credible scientists. So there's a lot of people out there who have been misled into believing this lie, this myth, that humans and chimps share so much common ancestry, and that's evidence for human-chimp common ancestry. As we just read on Scientific American website, or not as Smithsonian website, they were supporting their idea of evolution based on the genetic evidence. Well, now the genetic evidence doesn't support their ideas. Are they going to admit evolution's false? The reason this is such a huge problem is because there's no way to account for the massive difference that's observed based on evolutionary timelines. Think of it this way. You have the differences between, let's just take the human species as an example. You have, as one website pointed out, the genetic differences between humans is less than 0.1% across all humans, regardless of how different they may look on the outside. All humans are within 0.1% similarity. And the same is true for chimps. They're all genetically very similar to one another. But humans and chimps supposedly diverge from the common ancestor at the same time. So the question becomes, why is there a 15% difference between humans and apes? But within a species, there's less than a 0.1% difference in genetic makeup. This really doesn't make sense that within the lineages there to be so little variation, but between the lineages there's so much variation. It fits very much more conveniently within a creationist model that these are special creations, because you would expect, if evolution was true, the evolutionary narrative was true, there would be a fine gradation of genetic makeup between chimps and apes. There would be basically things in between humans and apes that kind of are a mix almost, because there's the rate at which genetic variation is being introduced is common the entire time between the two species. So you have to imagine that there'd be the amount of mutations in the lineages would be about the same as between the different lineages. I'm not quite phrasing this properly, but hopefully you understand what I'm saying. Is that the timelines don't make sense now, based on rates of evolutions between species and within species. You have to account for a much greater difference between the species in that time frame. But you have very little variation within the species, but there's no reason for that, because the same evolutionary pressures are constant all over the world, within species or between species. So this is a really, really horrible, troubling puzzle if you want to believe in evolution. There's really no way to explain it. In any case, their idea that humans and chimps are closely related, we can know that because it's gone. There's no evidence anymore. The evidence is gone. So I think this is really startling. This is really significant information. It really goes a long way for people who understand what's going on, who know it, to showing that the evolutionary narrative and myth is being shattered before our eyes, especially as it relates to human evolution. This is a really big problem for them, and this is why it's not being promoted. Now, if that study had shown what previous studies had shown, you can guarantee everyone's favorite websites will be promoting it. You know, your Google News, your Yahoo News, your Reddit's posts, your front page on Reddit, New York Times, Washington Post would all have write-ups about how what we've known all along has been confirmed. Humans and chimps are basically the same thing. But because the data is so destructive to evolutionary narrative, they're not promoting the idea. They're not promoting the information, the facts, because it shatters the lie that's been told for so long. So that's why very few people are going to hear about this. But for those who do hear about this, it is pretty revolutionary, and it's very destructive to evolution. And I'm curious to see how the evolutionists, especially on YouTube, are going to respond to this, if they respond at all. Now, a lot of them, when something in evolution gets refuted, they just kind of ignore it and pretend it doesn't exist, which tells me that they're being deceptive to either to themselves or to their audiences. But the facts remain. The facts are what they are. They can't deny the facts. And if an evolutionist wants to engage on this, I'm curious to see what their thoughts are. But anyways, we're gonna wrap that up. I just wanted to bring this information to people's attention that because so many people believe this narrative that humans and chimps are genetically similar, it's really important that people understand that it's been falsified scientifically with strong data proving it wrong. So we need to help others understand that, help refute when evolutionists make this kind of argument, to tell them they're wrong, tell them the new data proves them wrong. There's actually no information supporting the idea of human chimp common ancestry anymore. Things like that. So I hope this was helpful. Again, keep paying attention to ID updates. I think it presents really important information regarding this scientific discussion. I think it's because evolution is kind of important. It's big. It's in the public mindset that it's true, and it's based on all kinds of individual data points like humans or chimps are 98% similar. That means we see stuff like that. The more you show people that what the evolutionists are saying isn't true, the more they're going to realize that it's all an illusion. It's all a facade. And if it isn't, at the very least, they've been wrong about what they've been claiming, and that discredits them. So, all right, I hope this was helpful. I hope this was beneficial. I hope you learned a lot. And I'm interested to hear what other people say if they have any comments on it. So thank you. And until next time, goodbye.